Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links deck profile. Today we're taking a look at the brand new Elemental Hero NEOS deck, which is actually doing quite well. This has already had 2 second place finishes in tournaments and has done really well during testing, so I am actually quite excited for this deck. So, first things first, we'll take a look at the skill, NEOS Contact Draw. The requirement can be activated from turn 2 onward if all the monsters in your constructed deck are light attribute warrior type monsters with 1300 more attack. Now, obviously, the requirement here is a little bit incorrect. What it should say is that all of the light attribute warrior type monsters in your deck have 1300 or more attack, so we can't play any of the low attack light warrior monsters. But we can send up to 2 cards, Elemental Hero NEOS and or Neospatian Aqua Dolphin and or Neospatian Flare Scarab from your hand to the graveyard, then draw that many cards. If you have Elemental Hero NEOS in your graveyard, you can add 1 Hero Descent from your graveyard to your hand, but only once per duel. So if we have any of our fusion material, we can just send these to the graveyard, draw brand new cards, similar to how the Galaxy skills work with the Light and the Dark Galaxy. And then if we have NEOS in the graveyard, and remember every time we contact fuse, it's going back into our deck, so this can be tricky to do sometimes, and we have a Hero Descent in the graveyard, we can take the Hero Descent back to our hand, but only once per duel. So, I guess the first thing we should do is take a look at the fusion monsters, and we'll start out with the best one, Elemental Hero Pulse NEOS. So this is a contact fusion made using NEOS and Neospatian Aqua Dolphin, and for the requirement of none, we can destroy 1 face-up level 9 or lower monster on your opponent's field. So this effect is really strong. Just being able to get rid of an opponent's monster is just unbelievably powerful, and we can combine it with Curse of the Rising Light to flip something up and then pop it, and then we basically get a 2500 direct attack, which can be really powerful. Now that being said, only being able to pop level 9 or lower can get annoying. If your opponent does have a level 10 monster, it shouldn't come up that often, but if it does, it can wall this deck off a little bit, in which case we'll have to use the other fusion monster to deal with that, and this is Elemental Hero Heat NEOS, made using NEOS and Flare Scarab. But this card lets us send the top 2 cards of a deck to the graveyard, and notably sending the top 2 can be relevant depending on the situation you're in, because we could, for example, send Elemental Hero NEOS to the graveyard, or any of our Neospatians, and then bring them back with either Hero Descent, or if it's NEOS, we could bring it back with Secret Order, so it can be relevant just milling some cards. But then it gains attack equal to the number of cards on the field, so both your cards and your opponent's field, times 200. So before you use this effect, ideally you want to get as many cards on the field as possible, just to gain as much attack as possible, which is just really good. Originally, I did think that Heat NEOS was going to be rather underwhelming, but after testing it a little bit, this guy can actually get reasonably big, reasonably consistently, which is actually pretty cool. This guy can easily reach over 4000, which is really nice. The last monster in the extra deck that matters is Thunder Giant, and this is only relevant because we're playing Elemental Circulation, and we're playing 2 copies of Sparkman just because it has the best overall stats. So you need to have the Thunder Giant in the graveyard to reveal with Circulation in order to make this work. So for the main deck monsters, we have Fake NEOS. This card is actually insane, is one of the best playmakers of the deck. So send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. This turn, this card's name becomes Elemental Hero NEOS. This turn, you can only attack with warriors. So only being able to attack with warriors is it's fine. The only time it would ever come up that you'd want to attack with a non-warrior is Flare Scarab, because this is an insect. Outside of that, it's completely fine. But this lets us effectively just normal summon this, normal summon any of our Neospatians, and then go into a contact fusion, which is so good. Next up, we have Neospatian Aqua Dolphin. So 600 attack, 800 defense, not the best. This is a warrior, which is quite interesting. But we can send 1 card from our hand to the graveyard, look at your opponent's hand. You can send 1 monster with an attack equal to or less than the face-up monster with the highest attack on your field from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. If you sent a monster to the graveyard with this effect, also inflict 500 damage to your opponent. But this card is really cool, and we can do some interesting things with this. For example, if your opponent has a Shady and only 1 card in hand, we could summon out the Aqua Dolphin, which then sort of forces the Shady, or if they hold the Shady, we can get the last card out of their hand, assuming it is a monster, and then they can't use the Shady for the rest of the turn. But if they have a Spell Trap, we can't discard the card, so we lose a card for no real gain. The other thing we can do is turn on our Rising Light. If our opponent has 2 or more cards in hand, we could use the Neospatian Aqua Dolphin to try and get them down to 1 or less cards in hand, which will allow us to use Curse of the Rising Light, so really good. And obviously we want to use this to go into Pulse NEOS, so it's necessary for the deck anyway. Then we have Flare Scarab. This card's effect rarely comes up, because again, we're going to be locking ourselves into attacking with warriors a lot of the time, because we have that restriction on both Fake NEOS and Hero's Descent, so can be a little bit tricky. But gaining attack can be useful. Again, most of the time we're going to be discarding this with the skill, and we're going to be bringing it back just to be contact fused into Heat NEOS. Then we have the NEOS itself. Again, it's just a vanilla, but it's got decent stats, right? 2500 attack, 2000 defense is nice. We can bring it back with Secret Order. We can bring it back with Hero Descent. We want to discard it for the skill. NEOS just has a lot going for it, and a lot of the time we will make a board of double contact fusion, and then if we can, Secret Order back a NEOS as well. And that's probably the strongest end board we can make. Now finally, the Sparkman. Again, his stats are fine, and a lot of the time, if we don't have the Secret Order, or if we don't have a NEOS in Graveyard, Sparkman will be that last piece of the puzzle to fill up that third monster slot on the board. Then we have Order. Secret Order, again, really, really good to bring back a 3200 guy that can't be affected by things like Shiny Shady. But also we want to use this to get the body on board just to be contact fused with our Neospatians to go into our fusion plays, which can be really, really good. We have Pot of Greed. The only reason to not play Pot of Greed, again, is if you're going to be playing Compulse. At the moment, I still value Trap Hole a little bit more than Compulse. Compulse, I think, is really good, especially going into the current meta where we have a lot more contact fusions. Maybe Compulse will gain some value there, but for now we're playing Pot of Greed because drawing cards is always really useful. Then we have Hero Descent. This card is also very, very important. If we don't find Hero Descent, sometimes the plays can get a little bit awkward, because Hero Descent can revive 2 Neospatians from the graveyard, which can be really strong. We can also use it to bring back an Elemental Hero NEOS, which does effectively let us toolbox our graveyard and then go into those contact fusion plays. And again, we can get this back with our skill, so it can be really, really valuable. And I do think Hero Descent, although I think a lot of people looked down on this card and thought this was going to be a little bit underwhelming, I do think this is sort of the glue that holds the deck together and does allow it to play consistently. Then we have Curse of the Rising Light. Curse of the Rising Light, again, fantastic. We don't have a fantastic way to force out traps other than the Neospatian Aquadolphin, which is very situational. But Curse of the Rising Light is still really good, even if we don't get the draws off it, because we can flip our opponent's monsters up, and that is the only way this deck can beat set 3, which is not really ideal, right? We would much rather have like built-in piercing, or what would be perfect is if we had Sky Neos imported from the OCG, but we don't have that yet. That will allow us to attack 2 monsters, but without it, Curse of the Rising Light is really the best we've got. It's still really useful and an integral part of the deck. Then we have Elemental Circulation. Again, very, very important. We do want to set up our graveyard, so we want to make sure we get the Neospatian Flare Scarabs in the graveyard. We want the Aquadolphins in the graveyard. We want the Neos in the graveyard. We even want Hero Descent in the graveyard, so there's a lot of stuff we want to get into the graveyard. And we want to filter through our deck, draw out all of the power play cards that we can, and then use them to make a decent board and try and rip our opponent's board apart, which is something this deck does very, very well. For our Legend Trap Hole, again, this could be Compulse, but then we'd have to change the Legend spell out. I think Trap Hole is still really, really useful. Using this on a Gradius normal summon can be really, really powerful. Using this against Joint Tech is obviously ridiculously good. And every deck, there is something you'd like to Trap Hole. Against a Mirror Match, for example, we want to Trap Hole the fake Neos, and that can just sometimes stop your opponent's plays. The Trap Hole is still really useful. And then finally to Shiny Shady. Shiny Shady, again, so good in the current meta against everything pretty much except decks that are specifically Secret Order decks. So decks that are going to use Secret Order as the win con. So not necessarily the way this deck uses it, but the way that Miss Mutton uses it, the way that Baseball uses it, where they want to try and use it to just end the game on the spot. It's going to be really bad into them. And it's got not great value into Joint Tech, but every other deck in the game, Shady is so good. Being able to flip down a fusion monster gives you so much power. But let's talk about the deck. So you probably noticed we don't have that many monsters. This deck is actually only playing 14 monsters, 3 of which are high-level monsters, which are going to be discarded most of the time for our skill. This does mean occasionally you will open a hand where you just can't really do anything. If you just open a bunch of spell traps with nothing to really do, you're kind of just going to set a bunch of cards and pass and hope you don't die. When that doesn't happen, though, the deck does feel really, really strong. We're able to quite easily go into multiple copies of Pulse Neos or multiple Heat Neos or one of each, and then still have a Neos or a Sparkman to back it up. We're able to clear through pretty much any board because Pulse Neos is able to just get rid of those pesky monsters, and anything that's too big, Heat Neos can deal with itself. So this deck actually does feel really, really strong. In testing, we only lost, I want to say, 3 games total, and we won every other game. So I think we ended on something like 15 to 20 wins and then only like 3 losses. This deck is really, really strong. And like we say, it has been performing well in tournaments as well. So I do think this deck could be one to keep an eye on going forward. But let's fire in some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.